Chapter 11. Miley struggled to maintain his composure, fighting to keep his mind clear and focused. It was a foolish endeavor, as losing touch with reality would have been a merciful release. However, his desire to remain true to himself was stronger than any logical reasoning. Gradually, he managed to push aside his fear and horror, allowing him to assess his situation. He was slowly rotating, causing the stars in front of him to appear to crawl across his field of vision. The ship was already hundreds of yards away, rapidly retreating. Mars was now a mere speck in the distance. Suddenly a flash caught his attention from the corner of his eye. He turned his head to investigate and saw a life raft less than 300 yards away. It was traveling parallel to his course. The ejection of the life raft had caused the thump he had heard before being cast adrift. Someone was attempting to rescue him. It meant the possibility of life. Miley frantically flailed his arms and legs, attempting to propel himself closer to the life raft. He tried to guess who could have taken such a risk, but no one came to mind. No one he knew could have afforded passage on the Iroquois. Suddenly, a bright blue flash illuminated the area, and the life raft surged forward. The pilot was inexperienced, and the craft accelerated too quickly and at too steep an angle. More blue flashes followed, but the situation only worsened. After a long pause, a third attempt was made. Miley calculated the trajectory of the life raft. The amateur pilot missed the ship by 100 feet, but it was the best he could do. The ship drifted closer, but to one side, and would soon pass him completely. Suddenly, a figure in a spacesuit appeared in the airlock, holding a coil of rope. The rope was thrown, but it was too short and would pass within 10 feet, which might as well have been 10 miles for all the good it would do him. He remembered all the films he had seen on space and seized on the first idea he could remember. He inhaled deeply and yanked the oxygen tank free, aiming the hissing bottle and fumbling for the manual valve. It almost worked, kicking him toward the rope slightly, but most of the energy was wasted in setting him into a wilder spin. He blinked, trying to spot the rope, which was within 5 feet now. He waited until he was in position and threw the bottle away from it. It added spin to his vertical axis, but the rope came into view within arm's reach. He grasped it just as his lungs seemed about to burst, but he couldn't hold on long enough to tie the rope. His lungs gave up suddenly, collapsing and then sucking in greedily. Clean air rushed in, letting his head clear. He had forgotten that the inflated suit held enough oxygen for several minutes. His body struck the edge of the airlock, and a hand jerked him inside. The outer seal was slammed shut and locked, and there was a hiss of air entering. He threw back his helmet just as Stan Tanana jerked hers off. Her voice shook almost hysterically. "Thank God! Dan, I almost gave up." "I liked the air out there better," he told her bitterly. "If you'll open the lock again, I'll leave. Or am I supposed to believe this is a rescue and that you came along just to save me?" "I came along to see you killed, as you know very well. Saving you wasn't in my orders." He grunted and reached for the handle that would release the outer lock. "Better get back inside if you don't want to blow out with me." "It's up to you, Dan," she told him, and there was all the sincerity in the world in her blue eyes. "I'm on your side now." He began counting on his fingers. "Let's see. The spare battery, the delay in arresting me, the choice of Matthews." It was all true. Anger began to grow in her eyes. "Dan Miley, you get inside this raft. If you don't care about me, you might consider the people dying of the plague who need you." She'd played her trump, and it took the round. He followed her. "All right," he said grudgingly. "Spill your story." She held out a copy of a space radiogram addressed to Mrs. D. Everts and signed by one of the best doctors on the lobby board of directors. "Regret confirmed diagnosis. Top secret. Repeat top secret. Martian fever incubates 14 years. Believed highly fatal. No cure. Research beginning immediately." "Mrs. Everts is getting a top-secret clearance," Doc remarked dryly. "Don't be ridiculous, Stan." "She's Elmer's daughter from Space Lobby," Stan retorted, pointing to the message and underlining words with his finger. "It's a 14-year sentence. You couldn't have caused it. It's highly fatal, but people are being told it's just a skin disease. Research is starting, but you've already done most of the work. I can see that now. I can see a lot of things." "You've got me beat," he said. "I can't figure out how a young noblewoman like you calmly walked over and stole a life raft. I can't understand how your brilliant mind concocted this whole scheme in almost no time, and to be honest, I can't even fathom why Medical Lobby decided to save me at the last minute and sent you to do the job. You didn't have to spy on me. I've been trying all along to get this information to your research division." She sighed and slumped onto a small seat. "I can't prove my motives. You'll just have to trust me. But it wasn't hard to do what I did. That shuttle pilot was found during a routine check, stowed away on the life raft. I was with Captain Everts when he was found, so I figured out how to get into the raft, and I heard his whole confession. He wasn't the real pilot. He came from the villages to save you. The whole scheme was his. I just used it, hoping I could reach you." As always, her story had a convincing element she shouldn't have known. The pilot's farewell, addressing him as Dr. Miley, had been too low for her to hear, but it was something that fit her story. It was probably a deliberate clue to give him hope, to assure him the villagers were still trying. It shook his confidence. "And your motive? Your real motive?" he insisted. She cursed at him, then began ripping off her spacesuit. She turned her back, pulling a thin blouse down from her neck. He stared, then reached out to touch the lump there. "So you've had Selznick's migraine and know you're carrying the plague, and you've decided your precious lobby won't save you?" She dropped her eyes, then raised them to meet his defiantly. "I'm not just scared and selfish. Dad caught it too, and it must be close to his time. He switched to Mars Normal when he was a liaison agent and never changed back. Dan, are we all going to have to die? Can't you save him?" Miley was out of his suit and at the control panel. There was a manual lever, which Stan must have used before. It might work out here where there was room to maneuver and nothing to hit, but trying to make a landing was going to be different. "Dan?" she repeated. He shrugged. "I don't know. They've started research too late, and they'll be under so much pressure that the real brains won't have a chance. The top-secret stuff looks bad for research. Maybe there's a cure. It works in culture bottles, but it may fail in person. When I feel safe with you, I might spill the beans," she said. "Oh," he replied, his voice low. Then he sighed. "I guess I can see why you think I hate you, but I'm too confused. Maybe tomorrow, but not now. Be quiet and let me concentrate on landing this thing." He checked the fuel tanks and saw they were almost full, but that didn't leave much room for error. Mars must have been alerted by Everts and be ready to pick them up. He needed to land in the wastelands, away from any shuttle ports. They didn't have aspirators and couldn't cover much ground in their spacesuits. He had to land near a village where he was known. He maneuvered the ship, studying the manual on the control panel. According to the booklet, the ship was easy to operate, with automatic flare computers making it possible for an amateur to judge the rate of descent. It looked reassuring, but he still had to practice. He compromised, leaving a small margin for error, but with less practice than he wanted. He located Jake's village through the telescope and prepared to land. The thin haze of Mars's atmosphere rushed up as he blasted the ship. He turned to the flare computer and back to the viewport. The computer seemed to work as it should, and they landed about half a mile from the village. The ship hit the ground, bounced twice, and turned over. Miley freed himself from the seat straps and threw Stan her spacesuit and an emergency bottle of oxygen. "Hurry up with that!" As the pressure gauge dropped, the crew knew they had a problem. They were only halfway to the village when a fleet of tractors came barreling towards them. Jake, the leader of the pack, hopped out of his vehicle and beckoned for the crew to join him. "I heard about your situation on the broadcasts and had a feeling you'd end up here. Hop on in." With that, they sped off towards the wastelands. Doc couldn't help but notice the armed men riding alongside them. "What's going on here, Jake?" he asked. Jake gave him a solemn look. "You're in enemy territory, Doc. There's a war raging on."